WMPG thrives with support from listeners and from Maine Solar Solutions. Maine Solar Solutions helping empower homeowners and businesses with solar electric solutions for 10 years. Information at mainsolarsolutions.com.
You're listening to WMPG 90.9 Gorham, Portland, Southern Maine Community Radio from USM. Live from the Orion Cygnus arm of the Milky Way galaxy, this is Scientifically Speaking, a weekly half-hour program devoted to elegant curiosities. And I am one of your hosts, Sarah Chang, and joining me, as always, is Bernie Rhyme, DJ Star Watcher. How are you, Bernie?
Yes, hi, Sarah. Very good, thank you.
Bernie, you got a huge smile on your face today.
Yeah, it's snowing. Well, it was where I live, not here.
Bernie's our professor of the astronomy lab here at USM and our local protector of the night skies. Reach out to us at WMPG Scientifically Speaking at gmail.com or on Twitter at WMPG Sci Speak, and you can head over to WMPG.org to find the last 5 weeks of archives of all of your favorite shows, including this one. Bernie, could you let our listeners know what is up in the night sky for this coming week?
Okay, so today is going to be Friday, November 18th. We're actually in the studio live, but we're here a couple days before then, so it's not really quite live. It's kind of live. All right, so the moon will be waning crescent moon. It was actually last quarter on the 16th. And that means the sun is, of course, rising later because the days are getting shorter. So sunrise is at 6:38 in the morning and already sets at 4:14 p.m. So that's only a little bit over 9.5 hours, so the days are getting pretty short. But there is a meteor shower. If it clears, it's going to peak on the 17th. Well, actually, that was yesterday, but they'll still see some today. And then actually you have another chance of a different part of that stream on the 19th, tomorrow. That's called the Leonid meteor shower. So it emanates from the constellation of Leo. And usually it's only about 20 per hour. I did see one when the comet returned back in 2001. I saw over 1,000 meteors per hour out of this in 2001. So that was pretty amazing. That's called a meteor storm, actually. So in this case, you have a good chance on the 19th to see maybe even up to 100. We don't know exactly where this other stream will occur because it's after the normal peak, which would be 17th or 18th. I actually saw it on the morning of the 18th. So that's something going on. And then planets, the usual. You still have Saturn. It's setting. It's probably going to be gone pretty much by like 9 o'clock already. Then Jupiter's still nice and high. Probably sets around 2 in the morning. And then you have Mars, which is now coming up just after sunset because Mars will be at its closest to Earth on November 30th, so less than 2 weeks, and it'll be at opposition on December 8th. And, of course, if anyone got a chance to see the launch, Artemis finally launched after about 3 months worth of delay and surviving 2 hurricanes and all kinds of other things they didn't expect.
Yeah, it was supposed to go up in July.
No, August 29th.
August, okay.
That was the first day, and I kept letting my students know about it and putting up on the board and everything. And so it finally went up. The window started at 1:04, and it finally went up at like 1:47 the morning of the 16th, actually. So, and everything went perfect. They had a lot of good intro. I didn't watch a lot of it ahead of time, but they interviewed other astronauts and people. They had live feeds from the Johnson Space Center, and I was there like 3 years ago. They have a feed from the one in Huntsville, Alabama. And then they interviewed people at the launch site, some that were working on the project and others that were just there. So it was a pretty neat setup. But the best part was they had an actual astronaut who's going to be going up on Artemis called Caleb Barron. We actually had done a show on all 18 of the astronauts that were picked to go up, 9 men, 9 women, 9 rookies, and 9 experienced astronauts. Yeah. And she's one of those, one of the women. And so she had just come back from the ISS, and she talked to a person kind of anchoring the whole program when they would go out and talk to the different people about the details of the mission and everything. So it was kind of interesting to get her viewpoint and all the projects she did when she was on the ISS and everything. So it was a night launch. I actually have friends in Daytona, and they said they were going to watch it live, like they were, I don't know if they're going to go to Cape Canaveral, but they could see it from their house. They just have to go out in the backyard.
Well, that's nice.
Probably like 10 miles away. And being a light launch, I guess it was amazing how, I mean, I saw it on a live feed on my computer, but to actually be there, they were saying they were surprised how much it lit up the whole sky. I mean, launches are always kind of neat like that. But then they gave the update as it kept going. So it was, it only took 8 minutes to orbit, of course, 17,500 miles an hour. And then it had the updates of things going. Okay, so after a little over 3 minutes, it was already going 8,800 miles an hour. And it was like hundreds of miles downrange from where they launched it from. So it hit 10,000 miles an hour at about 6 minutes. and 12,800 miles an hour at 7 minutes, and it was 563 miles away. So you can just picture, all the fuel. Of course, the fuel is the big thing. And then at 8 minutes, it got into orbit, and then you had the solar arrays had to be deployed so you could get power, and and then I watched it up till about 2:30 in the morning and the other details. But the way it's going to orbit, it's a 25-day mission. It's going to do a retrograde orbit way beyond the orbit of the moon. And the main thing really will be to test the heat shield for the Orion capsule, which as it re-enters the Earth at 5,000 miles an hour, they're going to drop it in the Pacific off the coast of San Diego. And the next time, there'll be people, but they're not going to land till the third Artemis. But they will have humans the next time going up. So, so we're finally on track. It's up there.
Is that going to be a controlled drop back to Earth?
What, the Orion capsule?
Yeah.
And what do you mean controlled?
Because they've been talking about the whole how China has been just dropping their
oh
boosters and stuff.
No, it's going to be controlled. Yeah, right. Yeah. No, we're not going to drop rockets that might hit New York City and stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, theirs, we were lucky they didn't hit any cities.
Right.
But no, that's all controlled, and mainly testing the heat shield and checking out things on the moon for when the people will be going there in a few years. So I'm glad it's finally up there and going. And all the work that went into it, I mean, it was just neat when they talked and they showed the different mission controls. And a woman was the chief mission control person. So she gave an address at the end, and they had a tie cutting ceremony because this tradition is someone cut her tie, and then any of the other people could have their ties cut. Because they worked a long time on this. It wasn't, just since August when it was supposed to go up. They've been working on this maybe half their careers.
Right.
So I'm glad it's up there and that we're on track. And then, of course, Mars is the next step, but we'll talk about Mars a little bit later today.
When will it actually get to the moon's orbit?
Oh, it takes about 3 days to get to the moon.
I thought it was 7 days.
No.
3 days?
No.
That's fast.
Even the Apollos only took 3 days.
Oh, okay.
And this, I don't know if it's going actually any faster or not.
Yeah.
But yeah. Yep, 3 days, and then it's a 25-day mission. It'll do this big retro. He showed all the loops. They explain all the details on all the whole thing, but that's a lot of technical stuff. I was just kind of waiting for the
Yeah, I think he
launch
did
and
go
stuff.
through a lot of that.
Yeah, we would need to see the astronaut there, too.
Cool. So NASA did I think a 5-hour broadcast of all of it with a bunch of stuff. They had celebrities call in and ask questions.
Yeah.
They had kids call
Was
asking
this before
questions.
the launch or after? Or?
It was before.
Yeah, okay, I didn't
all
watch that
the
part before,
programming. So it was kind of fun, but you can find that on the NASA YouTube. is
Oh yeah,
where
I'm
I
sure they
saw
have
it,
all
yeah.
that. It was just kind of neat to see it live, and knowing I have some friends that were going to
Yeah.
watch it there at 2 in the morning and stuff. And yeah, I'm sure there's a lot more that goes on around it.
Yep.
But we're on the way, and that's kind of the neat thing too.
Yep.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Bernie.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And you can, if you didn't take notes fast enough, you can also check out the monthly What's Up column in the Portland Press Herald. All right. So, welcome to another episode of Scientifically Speaking. Today, we thought we would do a update on Mars.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're just going to run through kind of some of the most recent missions to Mars, both the U.S. missions or NASA missions and also international missions. And then we'll kind of run through, I've got about 3 big-ish updates and new discoveries, new findings that the rovers and the teams working on the Mars missions have discovered. I think most of mine are NASA based, though. So
Yeah, we'll have the UAE one and the Chinese one.
yeah. So if we can add those in too.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So, why don't we go through what is the earliest mission you've got that went to Mars on your
Well, I have the
list?
whole list of all the ones that NASA sent up, so that was 8. We sent up more, but they weren't all successful. The Russians, actually, a lot of theirs were not, over half of theirs. I think by now we've sent, as far as the whole Earth goes, over 50 of them, and only 2/3 of them actually made it.
Made it. Well, what happened? Why would they fail?
Well, the one I remember that was the worst case failure because it was something could have so easily been avoided. Actually, I forgot the name of it, but it was probably about 10 years ago. So NASA was working on metric and JPL was working on English. So they had different units. Which is a ratio
yeah.
of 0.62, you know the difference.
Yep.
And so it crashed into Mars.
Yep.
The orbit. There was a Mars orbiter or something like that. It wasn't the whole rover thing. but it totally crashed. I don't know if they found pieces of it at some point, but that was a few billion
It's
wasted.
like a big oversight.
Yeah, right. I mean, that's totally preventable and very simple. Just change the metric or, figure it out on the way up. It takes 7 months to get there.
Right.
You would think they could have figured it out by then or something. Because even with the launch of Artemis, I mean, they had last-minute issues and they solved them very efficiently and everything was great.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I heard one of
yeah.
the issues they had on the Artemis when they were like, oh, like it was like leaking hydrogen somewhere.
Yeah.
I was like, ooh,
Yeah, well, the
that's not a
hydrogen,
good one to be
it's
leaking.
a small molecule and it's very easy to leak, and that was some of the issues they had earlier. They tried in August and a couple times in October and so on. So they finally fixed all that. But all right, so I'll just run through some of the stuff NASA has done on Mars. So we had 2 different Viking landings in 1976. So that was really the first. Then we had Pathfinder in 1997, a little gap there. Then we had the famous Spirit and Opportunity rovers in 2004. They were so neat because they were supposed to work for like 3 months. But then the dust devils on Mars were wiping off the solar panels that we didn't count on. So they had energy for well over 10 years.
That's awesome.
So from 3 months over 10. They just stopped working recently, one of them. And then we had the Phoenix in 2008. That was a neat one because it landed near the North Pole of Mars. And I talked to one of the chief scientists. She gave us a talk at a convention at UNH. And after the talk, unofficially, she was saying that NASA had already found some life on Mars, which was kind of neat. And I was going to ask her more about it, but then she had to leave after the talk.
Oh,
Yeah, so you hear all these conspiracy things that we know of life on Mars, and but this is the chief scientist of the Phoenix mission, and she was actually telling me that unofficially after the talk. So that was really interesting.
Wow.
So that was Phoenix in 2008. They were watching some ice melt, and they dug down maybe just about a foot into the surface. Now they have more. So the Curiosity is already 10 years ago. That was 2012, and that had the nuclear powered.
wait, just going back.
Yeah.
Ice melt or ice sublimate?
Well, it didn't turn to water, so you're right. It was sublimated.
Okay.
But I remember some of the images from Phoenix, and there was a big patch of ice, maybe like a meter across.
Yeah.
And then I saw it like a day later because I wasn't following it minute by minute, and then it was like half the size or something.
Huh.
But yeah, I mean, even though Mars theoretically can get up to like 50 degrees, but the general average high temperature in the daytime is about 10 or 15 degrees. And you can't have liquid water at 10 degrees, obviously. So Curiosity 2012, and then InSight, which was stationary, that was 2018. And then the Perseverance, which just went up a year ago. So, and with the chopper, the little helicopter
Isn't Ingenuity another one?
and that was part of the
Part of Perseverance.
Perseverance, yeah. The first time
Because that was
they
a
flew-
helicopter.
basically flew like a drone on Mars,
Yeah.
which is much more difficult than you might think because the Martian atmosphere is 1% of ours. It's like flying at almost 100,000 feet up. The air was that thin. So this took 10 years to develop the thing. It had huge blades for a little tiny body, and it was spinning the other way around to generate more lift, and it never got very high, and it didn't go very far. Like a drone here, you can fly
Yep.
until it runs out of batteries. But still, it was a big achievement, and they're going to work on other drones to be going up with future missions.
Yeah. I think Ingenuity successfully flew on Mars in 2021, and it was the first aircraft ever to make a powered, controlled flight on another planet.
Yeah, anywhere else. So the moon, we never did the moon either.
And the flight lasted only 40 seconds, technically 39.1 seconds.
Okay, yeah.
3 meters above the Martian surface.
Yeah, so not very ambitious, but still, the fact that they could even do it at like 100,000 feet, 3 times the height of Mount Everest or something.
Yeah.
That's pretty neat.
I think
Even a
it's-
regular helicopter can't fly up there.
Yeah, it's flown much more, about like 18 flights. I think they only expected it to fly about 5.
Okay, yeah. So they usually outperform. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, those 2 rovers.
Man,
outperform.
NASA is the king of, under promise, over deliver.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah. It was better than the other way around. Yeah.
Yep. Cool. That's
Yeah.
a good overview. So, what are some of the more recent ones?
Well, the last time
from-
Mars was close to opposition, which was about 2 years ago, because we're hitting into one in December, they launched 7 different spacecraft. There was like a whole invasion of Mars. Like the Earth, you heard of Mars invading us and all that, all the science fiction. Well, then we invaded Mars, and so they launched around July of 2020, and a whole bunch of them got there spring and late winter of 2021, because it takes about 7 months. So one of them, it was the United Arab Emirates. It's the first one they ever sent up there. It's called HOPE. It was only a satellite. It didn't do the rover and the landing and the orbiter and some of the other stuff. But it was basically a fancy satellite. But still,
Al-Amal is the name.
Was that?
Al-Amal.
Oh, okay.
Al-Amal. Yeah.
Okay.
Is that hope, right? That's
Yeah,
what
hope,
I translated to. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we translated the whole, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so basically it is following, it's orbiting Mars, of course, it's not landing because that's way more difficult. So it was supposed to have only like 1 year, so it should have been done, but I think it got extended to 2025 because they had that option. So it's an imager, has a regular camera with, normal visible light. It has an infrared and a UV imager. And then so the 4 missions were to check out the weather and relate it to the ancient climate, which was probably warm and humid.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how they can make that connection, if there'd be anything left in the atmosphere to make that connection. But if there is, that they probably have enough instruments to do that. Then when they figure out the mechanisms that actually drove out the oxygen and hydrogen out of the atmosphere of Mars. It still has a very thin atmosphere, but so there was a mechanism that got rid of that. Maybe they can discover that. And then it was trying to figure out the connections between the lower and the upper atmosphere in Mars. So obviously the lower part is a little bit thicker. It's not very thin compared to Earth. And then the last mission of the HOPE orbiter is to see how the daily, seasonal, and yearly variations in the weather patterns connect globally across the entire planet of Mars. So that's a pretty good goal. And I didn't see any details, but I think they've met those goals or are working on them and getting that extended. So it's pretty good for a little country. Of course, they relied on a lot of parts that we made in this country and so on to make all this work.
And they launched across atop from Japan.
A Japanese rocket, right? They used and it was done to celebrate the 50th anniversary of that country. I wasn't aware the country was only 50 years old.
I guess that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, so they had another reason other than just for the science. But it's pretty neat. I mean, orbiters on another planet, they're still, they're not easy to make. They're not as hard as a rover or dropping something on Mars.
Yeah, but they got a weather satellite over there, so that's good.
Yeah, that's basically what it is.
All right, what are the Chinese doing?
Okay, so that's called Tianwen-1, and it means questions to heaven. So that's kind of the name. They have some clever names for their. So this was much more ambitious. It was an orbiter and a rover. And so they actually landed a rover called Zhurong, which means the god of fire in the south, probably related to Mars. And so far it has done about 900 meters, so roving around Mars, not as far as some of the ones we have. So mainly it went to a place called Utopia Planitia. So it's kind of, you have the Utopia and then the questions for heaven. So it's kind of up there. And it's already gotten over 10 gigabytes of raw data, the Zhurong rover. So it's moving around. I guess everything's working well on that. I didn't see any specific things that they were learning about. I know you have some things about Mars quakes and meteorites and that type of thing. So I don't know if it was sophisticated enough to measure for some of those things.
Yeah.
But it has the usual instruments and the different wavelengths that was analyzing things. And that's working pretty well. And that was also, it got there in February of 2021.
Awesome.
Yep.
It's exciting.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
Good missions there.
It's good that other countries are doing things too, not just us.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to share a couple of discoveries or kind of new things that we've learned on Mars, on top of, what Bernie has already shared. So Bernie, you talked about Curiosity, and Curiosity went up in
2012. Yeah.
2012.
Yeah.
And actually, because we talked about some of the aspiring or like up and coming astronomers last week. I think there was one who he had been part of the development of the camera systems for Curiosity. So anyways, Curiosity is one of the rovers on Mars. And recently, I think this was fairly recent, Curiosity... Well, actually, one thing. So 10 years ago, in August of this year, Curiosity celebrated its 10th year on Mars.
2012, right.
Yep. And I think at that point, Curiosity had driven like 18 miles.
Yeah, almost a marathon.
Yeah. And had ascended about 2,000 feet. And so it has been kind of exploring this crater called the Gale Crater and the foothills of a mountain called Mount Sharp, which is within the crater. And so it's been analyzing rock and soil samples and all this stuff. But, and then I think you mentioned this, it had determined that there is like liquid water and kind of some of the chemical building blocks for supporting life inside of Gale Crater. And so recently, it has driven through a canyon, which they believe was formed by water. And as water supposedly was drying out, it left behind some salty minerals called sulfates. And so Curiosity recently has basically discovered these sulfate-sparing kind of samples, I guess, if you will, just through this kind of narrow sand-lined pass. And so we're basically seeing that this area of Mount Sharp is really enriched with a lot of salty minerals. And so scientists just think that billions of years ago that there were streams and ponds left behind, and these minerals were left behind as the water dried up. And so we're hoping, or at least the scientists are hoping, that the hypotheses are correct and that these minerals can offer a few more clues as to how the climate has changed from being more Earth-like to being kind of the desert it is now.
Yep.
So yeah, that's kind of a cool thing. And some of the sulfates that it's finding, they're kind of popcorn textures along the sides of the canyon. And it's salty minerals like magnesium sulfate, calcium sulfate, gypsum, sodium chloride, like your regular table salt. So that's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
The other thing, so you had mentioned meteoroids.
Yeah.
So InSight launched not soon after Curiosity.
Yeah, 6 years later.
6 years. That was pretty long.
Yeah. Well.
And so the InSight lander, the whole purpose of this mission was to kind of understand some of the geologic activity of Mars. And so in 2020 and in 2021, the InSight lander they've detected seismic waves from space rocks that crash onto Mars. And so these represent some of the first impacts actually detected by the spacecraft's seismometer since it touched down in 2018. And I think people were surprised that it wasn't detecting as much as they were expecting, just because where Mars is located, it's very close to the asteroid belt. And so there's just a higher likelihood of being struck than, say, here, I guess. Yeah. Anyways, so what's really cool is that the InSight lander, it actually detected a meteorite strike it actually recorded some sound from this one strike. And so I wanted to share this a little bit. Let's see if we can play this. Did you hear that?
Yeah, I heard something, but not what you played before.
Well, because it came through my headphones.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Well, anyway, so Bernie has heard that before.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that was actually a recording of this one, basically this one impact, and it's kind of cool. I mean, it sounds like an impact far off into the distance, and you said it almost sounds like it's underwater.
Yeah.
I don't think it actually was underwater, but
No, there's no liquid water.
yeah,
Anyway,
no.
Yeah.
But anyway, so they were able to kind of go and scope it out, and I'll share some photos on Twitter. But they made these beautiful images of this crater, and it's I don't know that they have learned much else from it besides they're like, wow,
Is that
it's
the
so
actual
beautiful.
crater that meteor made?
This is the actual,
okay.
the actual crater, and it's I don't know why it looks like that. Well, I guess it makes sense. It's kind of blue at the very center,
Yeah, bluish.
which probably indicates heat. high heat, and then you can kind of see it kind of go out from there. And so so they were able, the orbiter's team was able to kind of find this meteoroid that that had made this impact using the reconnaissance orbiter, and took some really nice photos. So I'll share those with you guys on the interwebs, so you can take a look. But it's really cool stuff. And so yeah, I think InSight is actually going to be shut down soonish, sometime between this year and January, is what they said.
Yeah, because it's been like 28. Yeah, so 4 years now.
Yeah. I mean, that doesn't sound like a long time compared to some of the others, but I guess it's been a little rough. All right, and then the last thing that I wanted to share that's kind of exciting is so all of these rovers have collected a lot of samples throughout this time, and NASA and the European Space Agency on October 19th made a formal agreement on how they would go about returning samples from Mars. And so the two agencies, basically, they're going to create like a sample tube depot on Mars. I think they're still kind of in the planning phases of this. But this sample depot, or it'll be like a catch, will be at a location called Three Forks, which is near the base of this ancient river delta in this crater called Jezero. And so this catch, it'll have some samples from carefully selected rocks on the surface of Mars. And I think specifically they want to see how they tell the story of this specific crater's history, how Mars evolved, and hopefully might contain signs of ancient life. Yeah. I think they were kind of talking about this with Artemis. The question was, well, we have robots, why do we need to send people to Mars? And, at the end of the day, like, the robots aren't advanced enough to do all the things that we can do. And so that's also why we want to bring the samples back, so we can do all the fun stuff.
That'd be the first time we've ever done that. So, and the Chinese, they were planning to bring some samples back too from their mission. So so then maybe we can cross-check them out to see, because different parts of Mars they took them from.
Yep.
And we can run a lot more tests. We can run a few basic tests up on the planet, but then once they get back here, we can do a million more things on those samples. So we really need them here.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think this will. They like to say these like really grand words, but it might be true, right? So we think that this Mars campaign sample return campaign will revolutionize our understanding of Mars, and I think that's true because we'll be able to do so much more here.
I mean, the thing too, but when that scientist from the Phoenix mission said they already found life, I mean, that would be huge. So these samples, I mean, I think they're going to at least find some kind of fossils or bacteria.
No, for sure.
So it might have already been revolutionized, but once we get them here, maybe 5 or 6 more years, or you have a time period?
I don't have a time period, actually.
Okay, I think it'll be about that.
But they'll have like an atmospheric sample too, so we'll be able to smell what Mars smells like. I don't think they'll actually do that, but maybe they'll figure out what's in it, and then all that stuff. Cool. Yeah. So that was our update on Mars today, and
we're going there soon because the Artemis thing just launched. So that's the next step, of course, is Mars. Maybe as soon as 2037.
Yay!
So
that'll be exciting.
So that's not too much further. It's 15.
Would you go, Bernie, if they offered you?
Probably not. I'd go to like space without training, like some of those people, and without paying the $10 million, $20 million that it costs, because I'd like to be up there. But Mars, no. I mean, it's a 7-month trip each way. So you got to have a 3-year investment, because then you got to stay until it gets close to us again, which is what's happening in December.
Yeah.
So you can't just go, like, the trip to space is literally 4 minutes.
Yeah.
Including the launch, you're probably not even 12 minutes.
Yeah.
Versus 3 years. That's a big difference.
It's a long time.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you have been listening to Scientifically Speaking here in WMPG with myself and Bernie. Stay tuned for It's Not a Phase with the fabulous Izzy. And from your favorite nerds, what do planets like to read?
I don't know. What do they want to read?
Comet books.
Comet books? Okay. Not comic, but comet.
Comet books.
Okay,
like comic books.
Yes. Well, the comet hit Jupiter. So, yes, they want to read it, and that saved us in a way. It could have hit us otherwise.